Welcome to Crown TV. Immerse yourself with a captivating audio from our stories. We provide an alternative way to read books in audio. We upload many audiobooks as possible, from bestsellers to timeless classic. Subscribe and stay tuned for new upload.
Episode 366, The Bomber. Alex decided he had had enough. It was time to make these reporters leave them alone. Alex moved so stealthily through the crowd that not a single person noticed what he was doing. While the reporters were busy shouting out their complaints, they each suddenly felt their cameras being snatched out of their hands. They heard a series of smashes and crashes. When they looked at the ground and realized they were staring at a pile of smashed cameras and other filming equipment, they went crazy. The cameras, microphones, and cell phones that they had been carrying had all been smashed to pieces by Alex. The Moon Girls cheered when they saw what Alex had done. They were impressed by his decisive actions. They were supposed to help, but he hadn't given them a chance. They were still slightly dazzled by what had just happened as they stared at the broken equipment lying at their feet. "Leave now, or next time, it won't just be your cameras that get broken," Alex told the reporters. As he spoke, his eyes stayed locked on the reporter who had first argued with him. The man had stayed well away from him, so had managed to keep hold of his camera. The other reporters started to yell at Alex. "How dare you?" one asked. "Where are you from?" asked another. "You have to pay for the damage you've done, and you should be arrested. What kind of man are you?" demanded another. The reporters were angry, but all they did was stand and yell. They were a little afraid of Alex after what he had done, and didn't want to provoke him into attacking them. The Moon Maidens hoped that someone would attack their lord so that they could protect him and teach the reporters a lesson. Alex was aware that there were both good and bad reporters. He knew that some could be reasoned with, some would need to be flattered, and others would only respond to aggression. He glared at the man who had argued with him. When the other reporters saw the violence in his eyes, they stepped back to allow him through. None of them dared to stop him. "You, come here," he said to the reporter. "Stop pretending to be a journalist. The Blood Brothers talk a lot of rubbish, pretending to be respectable, but you can never wash off the smell of being a gangster," he continued. "The Blood Brothers?" When Celeste heard Alex mention the name of the gang, she suddenly had a feeling that something was badly wrong. She quickly went over and took another look at the reporter. Other reporters were also shocked. Who were the Blood Brothers? Was there a story they should be chasing? Some of the more quick-thinking journalists started searching the internet on their phones for more information about the Blood Brothers. When he heard Alex accusing him of pretending to be a journalist, the man froze. He glanced at the exits, but realized they were all blocked by the Moon Girls. He was surprised and said, "Why do you think you know me? And why do you say I'm not a journalist?" "Simple. You have a sense of desperation." "Other journalists don't have the same bloody smell that you have," Alex replied. The other reporters were surprised by Alex's reply. They wondered, what kind of desperation and bloody smell? What's going on? They were confused. Alex stared into the man's eyes and asked, "Did you put the bomb in the car? Why do you kill people? Is the world too beautiful for you?" The man was flustered. Alex had exposed him in front of so many people. Those reporters who were looking for a juicy story got exactly what they wanted. The fake reporter was a sinister killer with a bomb. The man started to panic and looked for a way that he could escape and hide. When he realized that he couldn't escape, he smiled. I'll be honest with you, he said. There's a bomb in my camera that's large enough to blow up the whole building. If you let me go now, you might live. If you don't mind dying, all I need to do is press the shutter. Everyone panicked because they could see that the man was serious. Although they weren't completely sure that they could believe him, they weren't prepared to take the gamble. With a smile on his face, he said, Alex, you're right. Next time I'll disguise my emotions better, or I'll command someone with the right temperament to do the job for me. So you're one of the gang leaders. Are your men around here? Alex asked. 2 of them died and the others are occupied elsewhere. That's why I'm here in person. The man was still smiling eerily. It made the reporters shiver. Well, I'm in a similar situation, Alex smiled. Really? I've never met such a fierce opponent before, but it makes no difference. I don't need to fight you because I can simply detonate this bomb and finish the story here. I'd also like to thank these reporters for covering this story, the bomber said proudly. Well, it's a pity that your plan is flawed. You can try it, but I promise you that I won't die, and neither will anyone else here. Alex looked even calmer than the bomber. He had the air of a cat playing with a mouse. The bomber was dismayed for a moment. His confidence began to falter, but then his smugness returned. He said, Ha! You must be joking. This is a special bomb. Its explosive force will blow up everyone here. You're strong and fast, and you might well be able to get out of the way in time, but what about your friends? And what about all these innocent reporters? If they die, it'll all be your fault. Alex frowned and replied calmly, I said that my friends will be okay. They will walk away from here. As for these reporters, they have nothing to do with me. If you want to blow them up, just please get on with it. Stop wasting my time. A female reporter stood up and yelled, Stop! What are you doing? He's clearly a lunatic. Why are you letting him do this? Alex ignored her. His eyes never left the killer, ensuring that he would see even the slightest movements that the man made. The bomber hesitated. He planned to use the reporters as hostages to help him escape. But it was clear that Alex didn't care whether he let the bomb off or about the lives of the journalists. He wasn't sure what to do. Alex, don't force me to detonate the bomb. I don't believe you could survive it, he said as he pretended to get ready to detonate the bomb. Hurry up. I'm tired of waiting. Let's just see what happens, Alex replied casually. Seriously, though, what sort of leader are you when you're so afraid of death? At that moment, the wail of a siren could be heard approaching the distance. And moments later, 3 police cars roared up outside. As soon as the cars stopped, 10 Special Forces police officers rushed toward them. The lights on their cars were flashing, and the atmosphere was chaotic. The killer grinned. He looked at the police and said, Alex, you can't hurt me now. Episode 367, He's a Murderer. The bomber believed that now that the police were there, he would be able to escape easily using a hostage as cover. He could then come up with a new plan to assassinate Alex. But just as the killer started to relax, Alex suddenly jumped at him, and before he had a chance to retaliate, he found himself pinned to the ground. Alex turned to the journalists and cried out, What are you waiting for? Don't you want to leave? Go find cover. The reporters realized what was happening with a jolt and looked at the killer, who was now pinned to the ground. They started to back away towards a nearby building. You go too, Alex said to the Moon Maidens. They were reluctant to leave, but they always obeyed Alex's commands, and it was clear that he was safely in control of the situation. Alex sneered at the killer and said, "I told you that we were going to leave safely, and now you have no choice but to believe me. But you did threaten to blow me up, and I really hate people who threaten me." Then Alex gently pressed the camera into the bomber's hand, and then turned and ran toward the building the others had ducked into. Standing in the doorway, Alex turned and looked back at the bomber, who was still lying bewildered on the ground, hugging the camera. At that moment, someone patted him on the shoulder, and he turned around to see that it was Chelsea Woods. She was fully armed and was in command of the other officers. "What did you just do?" she asked Alex. Alex shrugged and said, "Nothing." The killer realized that he had a conscience and decided to let us go. Chelsea looked around and said in a low voice, "I don't believe you." Suddenly, a loud boom came from the direction of the assassin as the bomb exploded. The current of air that it emitted was so powerful that it knocked a lot of people over, even some who were standing 100 yards away. Chelsea felt the impact a little, but Alex was standing in front of her and blocked her from the worst of it. After a while, the shocks from the bomb subsided. Chelsea looked at Alex and asked in surprise, "The bomber killed himself?" Alex looked around him and saw that the roadside was a mess. Debris was scattered everywhere, and even a large billboard had been overturned. "Well, he was a very considerate killer," Alex said with a smile. Chelsea glanced at him. Her intuition told her what had happened, and she knew that Alex had done it. She was about to question him further when a female reporter, Lizzie Fairfield, approached them and said, "Officer, you must arrest this man for murder." Alex was taken aback. He looked at the reporter and thought, "Don't you realize that I saved all of your lives?" Alex had tricked the bomber into turning his weapon against himself. If he hadn't detonated the bomb, most of them would be dead now. He was confident that the police would understand the situation and be satisfied with what he had done. Chelsea looked at the reporter. They had dealt with each other several times before and knew each other. She said, "Lizzie, do you have any evidence? How did he murder him?" Lizzie was dismayed when Chelsea challenged her. She knew that she was generally a very responsible, impartial, and honest officer, but it seemed that she was biased when it came to that young man. "Chelsea, he detonated the explosive device on the killer. You must arrest him at once," Lizzie yelled. Chelsea ignored the reporter's outburst, and turning to Alex, she asked him, "Is she telling the truth?" "No. I'm telling you that he detonated it himself," Alex said solemnly. "You rogue!" Lizzie screamed. She was almost too angry to speak. Chelsea said coldly, "Lizzie, I must remind you that this is a police investigation. Please try to contain your emotions and tell me what happened calmly. Do you have any evidence that this man committed murder?" I... Lizzie stuttered. Then she said, "The bomber was unable to move, so how could he have committed suicide? When we all ran away, we left this man alone with the killer, and the bomb hadn't been detonated. He's the only one who could have done it." Lizzie felt that her logic was impeccable, but Chelsea didn't seem to be convinced. She tried to work out why. "Lizzie, you're just telling me your thoughts and deductions, but you're not a detective. I'll ask you once more, is there any evidence? Chelsea's voice was as cold as ice. The reporters listening in understood that she was protecting the arrogant man. You... Lizzie stammered. She was starting to lose her conviction. She tried once more. Why do you need evidence? It's obvious that he's the one who detonated the bomb. But you don't have any evidence, right? Then he can sue you for slander, Miss Fairfield. Fortunately, you're not a police detective. Your attitude would have been disastrous for the police force. We cannot arrest people because we feel like it unless we have evidence against them, Chelsea said. Come on, I'm not going to sue her, Alex said impatiently. The Moon Girls tried not to laugh. They found their lord very humorous. Officer Woods, you're covering up for him, Lizzie said angrily. Well, you can make an official complaint at the station, but please stand aside now and don't hinder the police investigation, Chelsea replied casually. Lizzie was about to retort when another journalist grabbed her arm and said, Leave it. The reporter thought, This man saved our lives. What's wrong with you? Why are you trying to get him in trouble? However, Lizzie couldn't let it go. After thinking for a moment, she said angrily, Okay, forget the murder. I don't have any evidence for that, but he also smashed all our equipment to pieces. Are you going to make him pay for it? Alex explained. The assassin's bomb was disguised as a camera. To ensure everyone's safety, of course I had to destroy all the cameras in case any of them are also bombs. I can't see how there can be a problem with that. The reporters were silent. Alex had told the truth about the bomb, and they really couldn't find fault with his logic. Lizzie was getting desperate. How could he get away with smashing all their valuable equipment? Why didn't he feel guilty about it? She thought for a moment and then said suspiciously, I think you're involved. You turned up exactly the same time as the bomber. That's really suspicious. I think you cooperated with the killer to cover up his criminal actions. Before Alex could argue, a voice from behind them said, Alex is telling the truth. We were supposed to hold a press conference this afternoon. That's why so many reporters are here. We're working with the police to investigate a series of bombings connected with the Clifton Group. We hope the police will uncover the truth. It was Rufus Clifton. Episode 368, A Search for Chris. Chelsea frowned slightly as she thought about how many reporters appeared in the seconds after the explosion. She had thought it was strange at the time, but what Alex and Rufus said would explain it. Lizzie quickly denied it. That's not true. The TV station is very close to here, and we came as soon as we heard the news. That's how we got here so quickly. Chelsea noticed how she contradicted everything that Alex said. The other reporters quickly supported Lizzie. Yes, officer, we had nothing to do with it, one of them said. Yes, we also received a call about the story and got here quickly, said another. When Lizzie saw Rufus approaching and heard that he was supporting Alex, she suddenly felt apprehensive. She didn't want to get into trouble with a family like the Cliftons. Chelsea saw that Lizzie was losing her determination and told everyone that she had a clear picture of what had happened. She knew that the killer's death had something to do with Alex, but she didn't want to investigate it any further and decided to get rid of the reporters. She told them, Thank you, but you may leave. We'll release any important information about the situation as soon as we can. If you're interested to learn more about what's been happening with the Cliftons lately, you can come to the conference hall with me right now, Rufus told the reporters. Let's go and find out what's happening, one of them said excitedly. But all our equipment is broken. groaned another. Yes, mine's totally destroyed, agreed another. Rufus was shocked. He had never met a reporter who would risk missing the opportunity to get a good news story. He said, You'll just have to note down the information that we give you and do a special kind of interview. We do have a lot of exclusive information to release. Okay, they agreed hesitantly. The reporters saw that they had to make the most of the opportunity, and most of them jumped up immediately and followed Rufus to the conference room. They scrambled amongst themselves to find pens and paper in their bags. Only Lizzie hesitated. One of the other reporters pulled her arm and said, What are you doing, Lizzie? Get a move on. The reporter thought, Can't Lizzie tell this is a good story? If she can't sniff out an opportunity like this, then she should be working in the office, not as a reporter on the ground. Still, Lizzie hesitated and stared at her broken equipment. The other reporter whispered to her, Lizzie, why are you so stubborn? You can't hold Alex responsible. If you think about it, it was heroic of him to tackle the gangster so decisively when public safety was at risk. Perhaps he should even receive an official recognition from the mayor for what he did. Lizzie looked at Alex grumpily. Then she glared at Chelsea, who glared at her sternly. And Lizzie realized that she was waiting impatiently for her to decide whether she wanted to proceed with her allegations against Alex. Okay, I'll go, Lizzie said. She wasn't a fool, and she knew that she couldn't afford to offend Rufus or Chelsea for the sake of seeking justice for the bomber. She wasn't the only one whose equipment had been destroyed. The other journalists were all in the same position as her, and none of them was demanding compensation. I'll have to let it go, she murmured, and then followed her colleagues. By then, there were very few people left at the scene. The police had moved almost everyone away. Did you detonate the bomb? Chelsea couldn't help asking Alex once they were alone. Yes, the bomber was going to kill my friends and relatives. I did what I had to, Alex replied confidently. His arrogance made Chelsea feel uneasy. She realized that he wasn't afraid of anything, including the authority of the police. She wanted to ask him whether he included her as one of his friends and would protect her, but she was too embarrassed. She blushed and thought, As a police officer, I shouldn't be relying on other people to make me feel safe. What a joke. Frustrated with herself, her tone became sharp with Alex as she said, Do you have any sense of acting within the law? Actually, forget it. I have too much to do to discuss this with you any further. She turned and walked away angrily. Alex walked back over to the Moon Maidens, who greeted him excitedly. You were amazing, Mr. Alex, said one of them. Let's find out what Lizzie's angry about, suggested another. Alex smiled. The new car that the four girls had just bought had been blown up, but they were acting as if nothing had happened. You'll join us at the Clifton Mansion later, Alex told the four girls. He looked carefully around him but couldn't see anything out of place. He concluded that the attacks the Blood Brothers had arranged for that day had all been dealt with successfully. However, Alex was far from satisfied. His goal was to deal with the people running the gang. Only then could he ensure the safety of the people that mattered to him. He knew that things were far from over. In the Stedman family mansion in Baltimore, Art had postponed his engagements and returned home from work early for the first time that he could remember. He had been unable to get through to Chris on the phone, but he wasn't too concerned yet. He could think of a lot of explanations for his son's lack of contact. Perhaps Chris had been on another drinking binge. Or it could be that he was off with a new woman and didn't want to be disturbed. It could simply be that he was enjoying himself somewhere with friends. So he waited patiently for Chris to contact him and thought about the lecture he was going to give him when he finally caught up with him. He would tell him that no matter how much fun he was having, he should never forget his responsibilities. Art was feeling content. It was turning into one of the most relaxed days that he had ever experienced. Jessup Clifton was finished, and it felt like the huge stone that had been pressing on his heart had finally been removed. Feeling indulgent, he even selected 2 very expensive bottles of vintage champagne from the wine cellar and put them on ice, ready to celebrate with Chris when he returned. But at 1 a.m, Chris still hadn't returned, and Art had still not been able to reach him on the phone. Art was starting to worry that something was wrong. No matter how much Chris was enjoying himself, he usually stayed in contact with his father. Art sat and waited by the phone for several hours, wondering what to do. Finally, he made a decision and asked his PA to start calling around Chris's friends. One by one, she asked his friends if they knew where Chris was. "Hello, I'm sorry to disturb you. Chris hasn't come home for a few days and we're trying to find him. Do you know where he is?" she asked one friend. "You haven't seen him? Okay, I'm sorry to disturb you," she told another. After making around 80 similar calls, she hadn't been able to find anyone who knew where Chris could be. Art became extremely concerned about his son and stayed awake all night worrying. In the early hours of the morning, he became convinced that something bad had happened. So he gave up on trying to sleep, got out of bed. Art picked up his phone and made a call. "I want you to conduct a thorough search of the city for Chris. You must immediately mobilize everyone who works for the Stedman family. Do you understand me?" A woman's gentle voice started to speak, but was quickly replaced by a man breathing heavily, then saying respectfully, "Okay, of course, boss. I'll do it now." Episode 369, The Pact. That morning, Art also called the Baltimore Police Department and officially reported Chris missing. They launched a search of the whole city. After a sleepless night's deliberation, Art also began to wonder if the Clifton family were somehow involved in Chris's disappearance. He used his contacts to access CCTV footage from the Clifton family mansion, which clearly showed Chris's Porsche leaving Clifton's home at the time he had expected. 3 days later, his investigators reported that Chris and his Porsche had been found in a reservoir in the city. However, the corpse was so rotten that the face was beyond recognition, and it was almost impossible to determine the cause of death. Art decided not to make any public announcement. Instead, he discreetly went to the scene and stood looking at Chris's body. After a long silence, a line of tears started to flow down his face. He whispered, "Chris, your death was clearly not an accident. Your body and car have been arranged intentionally to cover up a crime. Don't worry, my son. I will not rest until I have avenged you. Rest in peace, my boy." His heart was overwhelmed with sadness and rage as he reached down and closed Chris's eyes. Meanwhile, at the Clifton mansion, everything seemed to be quiet and peaceful. But in truth, the family were preparing themselves for combat. All kinds of defenses had been put in place, particularly around Jessup, who felt secure and happy. He had taken a little time off work and had been able to spend a couple of days relaxing. He had spent the time pottering in his garden, tending his flowers and feeding the birds. To add to his contentment, he had been accompanied by Debbie, who he felt was both intelligent and sensible. He felt very satisfied with both his business and his family. His happy contemplation was interrupted by Rufus, who approached him and said, "Father, Art Stedman wants to speak with you. He asked if you'll go to his home to meet him." Jessup put down his tools and replied quietly, "Really? Doesn't he know that I'm unwell?" Rufus told him, "Yes. He asked whether you're feeling better. If you're not feeling up to it, please let me go to speak to the Stedmans instead of you. He said that he has very important business to discuss." But Jessup refused immediately. He said, "What is there to discuss? Our two families are in conflict with one another. There's nothing to talk about." "Okay." Rufus nodded respectfully and turned to walk away. He felt sure that the Stedman family were plotting their revenge, and he knew they would act soon. As Rufus was about to leave, Alex approached them and said, "Rufus, let's go to see Art together. I think we should hear what he has to say." Rufus hesitated. "Art is ruthless and cunning. I'm sure he's setting bait to lure us into a trap. Can't you see that, Alex?" He had killed Chris in a moment of anger and had been regretting it for the past 2 days. He knew that he had to be careful when he went out, particularly anywhere near the Stedmans. "It's okay. Even if it is a trap, we still have to go and hear what he has to say. Rufus, you know that I can protect you," Alex insisted. Jessup sat down slowly, pondered for a long time, and then said, "Okay, we'll do as Alex suggests. You can go meet Art together, but you both must wear bulletproof vests and take 3 armed security guards with you." He called over the leader of his security team and told him, "I want you to go with Rufus and Alex to speak to the Stedman family. We're at war with the family, and you must take your best men with you to protect my boys." The man agreed and immediately left to organize the protection. In a heavily guarded courtyard at the Stedman family home, Art was sitting drinking a cup of tea. He was so deep in thought that initially he didn't notice that Rufus and Alex had arrived. His PA gently patted his shoulder and told him, "Mr. Stedman, Mr. Clifton, and Mr. Ambrose are here." Art was jolted out of his contemplations. He said calmly, "Rufus, have you really dared to come here?" Rufus's face turned white when he realized that Art knew that he was responsible for Chris's death. His legs trembled a little as he replied, "Yes, I've come to speak with you." "Good. I want to talk to you." Art put down his cup, turned around and glared at Rufus. His eyes were full of hatred, and Rufus's chest started to pound. "Mr. Stedman, what do you want to talk to me about?" Rufus asked bravely. Art and Jessup were of a similar status. Rufus understood the power that Art possessed and was justified in feeling afraid of him. "Why shouldn't we have a civilized conversation?" Art suddenly laughed. "In this world, enemies and friends are not absolute. Sometimes friends can become enemies, and enemies can also become friends. Don't you think so?" Rufus felt a little puzzled and remained on full alert. He thought, "If you try anything, I'll take you as a hostage and we'll die together. Besides, Alex is here and he'll protect me." Having reassured himself, He looked at Art confidently and said, "Mr. Stedman, you're wasting my time. Please explain what you want to talk about." Art looked at him for several minutes and seemed to convince himself of his next words. He looked at Alex and said, "Please, take a seat too. The three of us can try to be friends now." Alex was calm as he replied, "I'm fascinated to hear you say that, Mr. Stedman. I agree. Why shouldn't we be friends? Life is short. Why should we keep fighting and killing people every day? Isn't it better to drink together instead?" "Well, I'm glad that you agree. You're a young man that I admire very much. I believe that you will achieve great success in the future. Perhaps you'll even surpass myself or your father." He spoke so earnestly that a stranger listening in would not be able to tell that they were enemies at all. Although Alex was only there to protect Rufus, Art ignored Rufus and kept talking to Alex. "Alex, I won't beat around the bush. Someone wants to kill you, and I can help you find them." "Oh, so you know who was behind the recent bombings?" Alex asked. "Yes. The Blood Brothers have been occupying the Shamrock Hotel for several weeks. Apparently, they wanted to invest in Baltimore. They're very ambitious and want to expand on the East Coast." Art replied as he handed Alex a business card with an address on it. "Why are you telling me this? Aren't the Blood Brothers your allies?" Alex asked suspiciously. "Alex, don't ask so many questions. I'm looking out for myself," Art said impatiently. "I'm also willing to use my power to protect you. I can find out who's helping the Blood Brothers in Baltimore. I believe that as long as we work together, we can beat them." "Well, Mr. Stedman, I accept your offer." Alex stood up and said, "Goodbye then." Art turned away, and Alex and Rufus were escorted off the Stedman property. Rufus was very anxious, and as they walked away, he asked Alex, "Do you believe what he said? Are the Blood Brothers really expanding into Baltimore?" Alex ignored his questions but said, "You go back now and tell Mr. Clifton what's happening. He'll know what to do. Tell him that I will go to the Shamrock Hotel tonight." Episode 370, War. At 3 o'clock in the morning, a man with a bushy beard hurried into the brightly lit Shamrock Hotel carrying a suitcase. After checking in, he took the elevator up to the 47th floor. When he stepped out of the lift, he met a boy who quietly escorted him to the door of room 409. The boy swept his keycard and left. The bearded man was Alex, and he was at the hotel under Art's instructions. He walked into the entrance of the hotel suite and instantly heard a faint cry and howl coming from inside the bedroom. Without any effort, Alex opened the door and went inside, where he found a half-dressed man pinning two women to the bed. When they saw Alex walk in, the women screamed and quickly hid themselves under the covers. The man looked up and said, "Who let you in? Get out of here!" Alex didn't reply. Instead, he pulled the fake beard from his face to reveal his true identity. "It's really you!" the man gasped in surprise. It was Luther Duncan. He quickly took out a pistol out from under his pillow and roared, "Leave now! You can find your own way out. I won't bother getting up." Alex stretched out his hand and pulled a chair toward him. He sat down with his legs up on the coffee table and said calmly, "Do you think you can kill me? If it's so easy to kill me, you can relax. Do it in your own time. I'll wait for you." Luther snarled, "Alex, you're too cocky. Even if I don't bother killing you today, one day you'll pay for your arrogance with your life." As he spoke, he secretly squeezed the sensor in his hand. It was a very sophisticated transmitter that alerted all the other Blood Brothers gang members who were relaxing in their rooms on the 47th floor of the hotel. Within seconds, dozens of gangsters had rushed into the room and had their machine guns aimed at Alex. "Now do you think you can escape?" Luther laughed as he jumped out of the bed wearing only his underpants. His muscles betrayed his immense strength. But it was also clear to the onlookers that there was something wrong with his left arm. Alex glanced at the machine guns pointed at him and smiled. He said, "Wow, you must be really scared of me to need so much protection." "You're still cocky. Only a madman wouldn't be scared with 30 machine guns aimed at him." Luther felt very much in control of the situation. He didn't mind chatting with Alex a little longer. The next instant, he felt his head being pushed by something hard, and then felt another hard object being pushed against the back. "Don't move," he heard the two women yelling at him. He said, "Well, this is unexpected. I've never been beaten by two beautiful women before." "Put up your hands and tell your men to lower their guns," yelled one of the girls as she pointed her gun in his face. The pair were not the entertainment Luther had thought he was hiring for himself. They were, in fact, hired killers themselves. Luther raised his hands and indicated that he would cooperate. His expression was very calm as he raised his head and said quietly, "You heard the lady. Put the guns down." 30 AK-47s clattered to the ground, and the gangsters stood watching and waiting to be told what to do next. "It's a pity that fate has brought me to you. Otherwise, you could have had a few more days in this world." Alex picked up one of the AK-47s and started fiddling with it. "Thank you, but if you kill me, you'll be placing yourself in the firing line of one of the most powerful gangs in America. Even if you're the best fighter in the world, you'll be dead within a week," Luther said. "No, I won't. I'll take care of any gang member who comes near me. If your leader comes for me himself, I'll take care of him too," Alex replied as he continued to fidget with the gun. "Mr. Ambrose, I know all about you. You're a security guard at a university who thinks he's a martial arts master. You're cocky, but you really have no idea who you're up against." Luther laughed heartily as he looked at Alex. He really thought that he must be deluded. "Well, I'm not a security guard anymore. As the Lord of the Moon Palace, I declare war on the Blood Brothers. Tell your leader that if he decides to fight with me, it'll be the stupidest decision of his life. Then again, he has been mixing with stupid people for such a long time. Perhaps he is that foolish," Alex said. And then he threw the AK-47 to the ground. The Blood Brother members were incensed by what Alex said. No one dared to speak out against their leader, Tyson Slade. The last time that a leader of another gang had disrespected Tyson, the bodies of all the man's family members had been thrown into the Atlantic. "Are you willing to take responsibility for what you're saying?" Luther asked. His eyes were glistening with a mix of fear and rage, and his voice was strident. Alex replied confidently, "Of course I am. Now please call your leader and tell him that I'm challenging him to a battle. A fight between the Lord of the Moon Palace and the leader of the Blood Brothers. Tell him if he doesn't accept my challenge, he's a coward." "Are you really the Lord of the Moon Palace?" Luther asked curiously as he examined Alex carefully. He had heard from the leader of his sect that the new Lord of the Moon Palace was from an unknown martial arts sect in New York. He remembered because the leader had spoken of the new Lord with such awe. Well, this is the Jade Seal that I carry with me to prove that I am the new Lord. It's been handed down from generation to generation for 2,000 years. I'll let you look at it more closely. Alex took out a piece of green jade out of his pocket. He knew that it was unique and priceless. Luther's eyes widened when he saw it. He studied it carefully and guessed that it was worth at least $1 billion. However, he also knew that although it was incredibly valuable, it was also in many ways worthless. No one would ever dare to buy anything that came from the Moon Palace. Luther became even more curious about Alex. He looked at the security guard through fresh eyes. He had spent a lot of time studying the many gangs and martial arts sects of the U.S., so he knew what he was looking at. He admitted, "Well, it is the Jade Seal of a Lord, and it has the red moon, which is the unique symbol of the Moon Palace." The Blood Brothers had been forced out of Baltimore by attacks from other gangs, and in recent years, every gang member regarded the East Coast gangs as their biggest enemies. They had gathered a lot of information about the various cults operating on the East Coast and knew about the Moon Palace. Suddenly, the girl who was standing behind him pointed her gun at Luther's head and shouted, "Talk to him!" She had a phone in her hand. It was clear to Luther that he would not be allowed to leave or fight or do anything until he helped Alex make arrangements to face the Blood Brothers.
Thank you for listening to Crown TV. Please don't forget to subscribe, share and turn on the notification button.